Russia and Ukraine have been fighting a war which nobody was winning. We all knew that. But the United States, which are major players in this entire thing, did nothing for the last few years. Now things are changing. Welcome to Conversations. I'm Suresh Kochatal. Finally, after an 8-hour talk in the Saudi Arabian city of Jeddah, a ceasefire is in the making. The United States and Ukraine accepted a proposal for an immediate ceasefire and Washington resumed military intelligence sharing with Kyiv immediately. The 30-day ceasefire plan drawn up by the American and Ukrainian officials after 8 hours of negotiations at Jeddah in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday is something that needs to be ratified by Russia now. Following extensive negotiations, Ukraine has agreed to the 30-day ceasefire proposal put forward by the United States. United States had wanted this badly. In fact, President Trump, during his campaign and after being sworn in as the president, was very clear that this war had to stop. Too many people were dying. Too many young men were dying across both in Ukraine and in Russia. 2,000 to 4,000 every week, according to President Trump. And now that has stopped. That at least will stop. That is a kind of feeling that we have here. This agreement, in fact, paves the way for a resumption of the US military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, which had been suspended after the fiasco at the Oval Office in White House. That particular meeting in which Mr. Zelensky made a mess of everything saw President Trump getting angry and suspending the aid because Zelensky wanted to keep the war going. He had a lot of personal interest in keeping the war going because he was getting a lot of money from the US earlier and from the United States, United Kingdom and other European allies. Now all that is frozen, at least from the US side, and now the resumption might happen, but it all depends on whether President Zelensky will stick to his word. The ceasefire plan includes halting missile, drone and bomb attacks along the entire front line and not just the Black Sea region. That is very, very crucial. However, achieving Russian compliance remains uncertain as Russian President Vladimir Putin has continued missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv, which after the ceasefire proposal was announced was attacked. In a joint statement, the US and Ukraine has acknowledged that the terms of ceasefire would be subject to Russia's approval. They also agreed to conclude as soon as possible a deal to develop Ukraine's mineral resources, an agreement that was put on hold after the Oval Office dust-up. That joint venture is intended to expand Ukraine's economy and guarantee Ukraine's long-term prosperity and security. In fact, the US and Ukraine also discussed the humanitarian relief efforts that would take place during the ceasefire and the exchange of prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine. Representatives of both nations praised the bravery of the Ukrainian people and the defense of the nation and agreed that now it's a time to begin a process to move towards a lasting peace. The US and Ukraine have been speaking to each other on and off. But the last time in Saudi Arabia, Ukraine was not at the table, and that led to a big amount of kind of comments from the European Union and other countries saying, why is Ukraine not there at the table? But anyway, that's been corrected now. The US delegation in Jeddah was led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Michael Waltz, the National Security Advisor. They met with a delegation from Kyiv led by Andriy Yermak, the Ukrainian President's Chief of Staff, and Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, and of course Defense Minister Rustem Umerov. The intelligence cutoff had already impaired soldiers in the combat. Particularly, we saw that moment the US intelligence was out, Russia started attacking left, right and center, especially in the Kursk region, where Russian soldiers aided by fighters from North Korea have been rapidly advancing according to Ukrainian commanders in the field. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is expected to travel later this week to Moscow, where he could meet with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, but that scheduling could change. In fact, President Trump is very clear that he has expressed the hope that Russia will agree to the ceasefire and has announced the intent to discuss the same with President Putin soon. The US administration is also preparing to advise Russia that acceptance of the ceasefire is crucial for achieving lasting peace in the region. International leaders, including those from the UK, France, Poland, have welcomed the ceasefire proposal, emphasizing the need for a lasting peace. For all the bluff and bluster of UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer that there will be boots on the ground, there doesn't look like anything happening right now because Germany is not in agreement. Italy doesn't want it. The European Union itself is split down the middle. Forget having a kind of a tie-up with the United States in the first place. President Trump just doesn't like the EU and he's made it very, very clear. In fact, the upcoming discussion between the US representative and Russia are considered to be pivotal, with the hopes that President Putin will agree to the ceasefire, enabling further peace negotiations. Despite the ceasefire agreement, there have been reports of continued hostilities, and we saw that. And on Tuesday, there were multiple attacks launched by Russia on Kyiv and Kharkiv, following Ukraine's declaration of the readiness to accept the ceasefire. This was immediately followed by a drone blitz by Ukraine on Moscow and other Russian cities, which did a huge damage and killed people. These developments underscore the challenges in achieving sustainable peace and highlights the importance of continued international diplomatic efforts. Now, the ball is in the court of President Putin. And of course, Trump has to take it to him. As Trump often says, it takes two to tango. And definitely, the long drawn out Ukraine-Russia war, which has tired out everybody, which has destroyed everybody, both the parties, that's Russia and Ukraine, its cities, its citizens, its soldiers, needs to come to an end now. And that is what, with that, President Trump would have been in the line for getting maybe a Nobel Peace Prize, for all we know. In fact, he's looking forward to it. Let's see what happens from here on. Maybe we will have an update in the next 48 hours, and we will take you up and update you also on that. These developments underscore the challenges in achieving a sustainable peace in the region and highlights the importance of continued international diplomatic efforts. Now, as I said, the ball is in the court of Trump and Putin, and they will take it up from there. But it remains to be seen whether the Russians will demand, as they are worried that Zelensky might use this 30-day window to regroup his forces and also get his military equipment from Europe in place. Maybe even training the army to kind of take up the new role. This is something that Moscow is very, very wary about. US, on the other hand, wants to sign the rare earth deal with Ukraine and get the precious metal to boost their domestic manufacturing. In fact, there was a very rare joint statement after this peace talks we saw that happening in Saudi Arabia, where Washington announced that would immediately lift and pause it had put on the intelligence sharing and resume security assistance to Ukraine. What that means, God only knows, but definitely the intelligence is very, very crucial to Zelensky because Russian missiles need to be tracked, and without that, they'll be just shooting in the blind. The Ukrainian soldiers will be sitting ducks. President Zelensky said that in his first nightly video address after that, the talks that US is now proposing to take a full interim ceasefire, stopping the missile, drone and bomb attacks, not only in the Black Sea, as I mentioned before, but the entire front. Now, this is very crucial because Ukraine's acceptance of this is a kind of a taken for granted because they were on the backstop, as President Trump told Zelensky in the famous White House fiasco at the Oval Office, that they have no cards to play on the table and he would have no country left if he continues to do it this way. And that is why this is a very positive step and everybody is ready to take it. And that is what Zelensky also knows. Maybe Zelensky will move out of the picture after this because everybody knows that, there would be no more of Ukraine left after this war if there is a war that continued. Now, already Ukrainian cities are in trouble, worse than Gaza, according to President Trump. And to rebuild that will take a huge amount of effort. In fact, Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, that US would now take a jointly signed offer to Russia and that the ball was in Russia's court, as we described. Thus far, there's been no official response from Kremlin. Let's see how things go from there. And we will update you soon. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.